Howdy, all you delicious people. I'm here today to go out of my way to talk to you guys about The Invisible Man. Surprise! We are otherwise going to go into talking about this movie in a very cryptic like sense, give you a double five time count, and then go into spoilers about this movie. At the end of the day, in a very cryptic like sense, I would ultimately say that this movie did very much like it's kind of one of those it's a very slow burn movie, but in turn, once it does actually start really going, man, does it really go. It really ramps up at a certain point. When looking at this movie compared to probably the original, really it's not exactly one and the same. It doesn't go through the old tropes as a guy otherwise has to wear an entire mummy uh, thing on his head and like put on a suit and tie and otherwise just go about his day. Different set of circumstances, and it ultimately is kind of. It seems like a very simple movie, but it very much gets much more complicated. Because when thinking about it, are you thinking this entire time, is this girl crazy? Is she like psychically moving things with her mind? Or is this really going on? Is she really and truly going through this with some mystery man? This movie was like to me everything that I hoped that it would be. Case in point, I hoped that it was good, and I thought that it was good. the the funny thing of it is it's a complete story about the woman rather than the man, which I just thought was so odd. I'm like, so the Invisible Man is just a guy that's otherwise just there, and eventually he does stuff when he actually is present on film. But yeah, it's an entire story about this girl and her struggle, and all the while this man comes into her life and otherwise causes chaos. And I do really like the journey of which like the twists and turns that the Invisible Man tends to do on this woman. It kind of does really win me over to just be like, well, yeah, because there is some assumptions and there are some like accusations, and once you really figure out like, okay, this is not the exact same kind of Invisible Man as prior, then you could really get into this thing and really just go, okay, well, um like, who do we really think is pulling all of this off? Who do we really think is going through all of this? Who do we really think is kind of the person kind of controlling it all? But anyways, we go into this movie, and it is interesting to see that this girl quickly becomes the girl that cried wolf. And bizarrely, at some points, there is some assumptions made by people that realistically do not, in all actuality, make sense. Like, there's something about like distance away from somebody, like having like how exactly did this person get to do this with where they are? Um, but by and large, I guess since you're the only person there, you're the accused. I I really hoped for like a happy ending out of all of this. I really wanted there to be some kind of good story out of all this. Just besides once we actually get to the actual Invisible Man part. By by all case in point, I don't know. I kind of feel happy about it. Like there isn't anything I can go out of my way to complain about in this movie. There's nothing to go out of my way to mention that it's like, yeah, but I wish they could have done this better. I think like I'm kind of more than happy with what the outcome was. I just wish that there was so much more of a like even just a back like a real true legitimate backstory of the Invisible Man. There was just woman and that was all realistically and what she brought to the table to talk about um said prior relationships that she was in or said prior relationship she was in and how toxic that was and this and that. If you understand what I catch my drift. For a lot of people who had seen Hollow Man, they kind of go in almost a lot of the same kind of things when you have a person that you can't exactly see. The only thing that I was thinking the entire time was why not prove this girl's point by having like a heat vision goggles on? Or like there's so many times where it was like why not use that now and then they used it later on in the film and I was just kind of like dude you could have used that earlier. You could have used that. Like you could have had a whole like detector of Invisible Man right there in your hands, and you used it before in the film. Why not use it when the time is right? But instead, she does an alternative thing, which ultimately was like, oh, okay, well, I guess that kind of works, but then it quickly doesn't, and it's like, oh well, huh, they have to quasi try everything. Anyways, so this is not your grandpa and grandpa or mom and pop's Invisible Man. It's a much more dark story. It's a much more like you're wanting this person to win out of all of this, and it feels like there's another. It feels like there's gonna be a sequel of this movie towards the end of it. It kind of lets you know that there might be a sequel on the way, which I was okay with. I'm just kind of thinking of like, well, how are they gonna how are they gonna title the sequel? Are they just gonna like quasi call it something differently, or is she gonna just get mixed in with maybe some other characters? Going out of their way to say that there's gonna be more of this going on. So I think it's about that time because I've kind of really tried as much as quite possible to tiptoe my way around this movie, talk about it in a very non spoiler sense, but I think at the end of the day, I should go out of my way to really spoil this movie because ultimately, currently to the second of this recording, I don't think there's an actual real way to go out of your way to watch this movie for absolutely free. Honestly, I would probably just say rent the thing. If you have it on Redbox or something like that, somewhere along the lines, maybe like a Vudu or Amazon like rental, go ahead and check it out. I feel like that is actually worth the purchase because I felt that this movie was like, yeah, I want to kind of watch it back again and just kind of see what I missed because I feel like that's that kind of movie where you want to watch it again to just kind of see eventually if you missed anything. Any little like snippets, little hints, much more so that go along to say that this person's presence was much more well known, much more throughout this movie, and maybe I didn't notice it at first. So let's go in to the spoilers of this movie because at the end of the day, that's all I can really say about this film. Um, yeah, I thought it was good. I enjoyed it. Like, I at no point thought that. Like, at first, I was kind of I didn't really enjoy it. I didn't really enjoy this. Like, at first, 'cause it was kind of so slow. But then, then it got to the real ramping up, and I was like, oh man, yeah. You really got into it. You really got into the whole aspect, because I was pointing out, I'm like, where is the actual like person that's actually in the suit? Where is their story? Like, God, I'm like, you're completely forgetting what the movie is about. But then in all actuality, have to remember there's a reason why this character is called the Invisible Man, because his story is invisible to the naked eye. His story, he's a very, I guess in one way they did like perfectly go about the Invisible Man, because he's just a guy that is just kind of out of nowhere and starts to do these things. And the mystery about him, I guess, could make him much more of a menacing like character, that you're unsure about him. So let's go into spoiler time. Spoiler time. It's about that time again to spoil this movie. At the end of the day, like I would say, this isn't a bad film. Like, I was just kind of there might be some people that honestly did not like this film, but I think overall I think a lot of people liked it. So, spoilers about this movie if you want to avoid hearing what I have to say, or you just like to hear the sound of my voice anyways, or ultimately you had seen this movie and you're like remembering through what I've mentioned. You're like, yeah, I like that part too, or yeah, I didn't like that either. So we begin this slow crawl where we ultimately have this girl who is ultimately trying to evade her boyfriend. And in the end, she evades him to go to this friend of hers that ultimately is a cop, and he has a sister. Eventually, we find out that evidently this boyfriend that she tries to evade otherwise supposedly had took his own life, supposedly overdosed on pills, and had supposedly taken his own life. For the brother's attorney to ultimately give her like an allowance, I guess, of $5 million over months of time, showing that there's photos of him dying, and that I guess is the proof that she needs. Ultimately, she is kind of very much relieved that this boogeyman isn't out there. She's very relieved that she can breathe easily, because she was a person that would seem to never leave the house. She would go on these long-winded rants about how this long-winded rant about how manipulating this guy was, and seemingly how seemingly just a mastermind of just taking control of somebody, and like it seemed like he knew what everyone was thinking, and he was just this ooh ah. So not like the boxer, like the original movie. So we go out of our way to have this girl just go into a normal life, kind of get dresses, and just be like, yeah, I guess I'll just kind of get a job and I'll do all this stuff. And ultimately, she ends up la di da, everything is fine. And then one night when she falls asleep, there's flashes. Flashes. Where ultimately we find out later that it's from a camera phone. Bizarrely, I just don't quite understand why the pictures were taken, because the photos didn't really go anywhere. Um, I guess it was just kind of much more of a like maybe they had the photos to do something with them, but then when it came up, it was like I guess we should just say that this is gonna be his phone and stuff like that. And sure, all right. So we end up having it to where this girl, like the first real cementing presence of this ghost, is footprints on a bedsheet. To where this ultimately freaks this girl out. The guy runs in, the cop runs in, he's like, huh? To our no evade, to otherwise. And then we're just like, well, this girl is just scared, but there's footsteps on the blanket. Come on. But anyways, we go to where the girl's cooking breakfast and burns it supposedly. They take a fire extinguisher to this breakfast. I'm like, yeah, that is the thing that you probably should use when ghosty you think is there. Like you can just pa pa and just yeah. But they don't use that until the very end. How stupid was that? If this girl really thinks that there's a presence of person in her house that's invisible, pra pra, that's extinguisher, extinguisher, fire extinguisher, but whatever. Um, Ultimately, we get it to where this girl is going into a job interview. The job interview goes horribly awry because she misses all of her, I guess, blueprints, which eventually is mysteriously appears in another place in the home. And then we have this girl pass out over on drugs. And she never knew that she had any kind of medication in her system, as well as something else in her system, let's just say. Anyways, we get to the aspect of seeing this pill canister esh like thing on in the bathroom. The pills were used, of course, before to drug her douchebaggery like boyfriend. And ultimately, we push on to her going to the attorney's brother, ultimately cementing that he's not dead. He's still very much alive. Where is he? Looking at the brother, I'm like, this guy looks guilty as hell. Like, how is this gonna turn into like something with the brother? Like, we kind of get to that cut to the nick right there. Um, because it seems like this brother is having too much screen time. It's bizarre. So I kind of cemented right then and there, like, he has something to do with this. So we go, and this girl ultimately is really very much just getting worked over, and it's crazy. We get to where the girl is just kind of like laying down on the floor, and this girl pops in and is like, hey, how about we have a girls' night? And then ultimately the girl is on the floor, and the other girl is like pretty far distance away from her. But there's supposedly this slap that comes out of, to me, nowhere. And automatically this girl accuses the girl on the floor, of slapping her. And I'm like, she was on the floor. I think she was like standing up or something like that. How could a sitting down person slap this girl? She would have had to have like jumped up from the floor and slapped her just to get back down on the floor. But the accusation was she's the only one there. All the while, you also get this like email coming to her sister. I think her sister Yeah, let's just say it's her. I think it's her sister. That once that now that the girl has money, that she like put all these like hateful email things, and like that she was telling her that she wasn't going to get the money, and supposedly that she wished she died or otherwise something brutal along those lines, to be eventually used against her later on sometime down the line, foreshadowing to something, um reasonably. And of course I'm like, email, I'm like, yeah, yeah, that's the perfect way to like, we're kind of using every single piece of technology against this woman to have it be another person writing these things and doing these things, and really just twisting the knife. Because yeah, we're really seeing this now, and leading to where we dare say is having this girl starting to really cry wolf to a lot of people, mentioning that she's seeing some things. She thinks it's her old boyfriend back from the maybe dead. But in the head of this woman, eventually we get down to where this girl eventually calls her ex-boyfriend's cell phone. She hears a tone coming through the house. She seeks it out, ultimately leading to the attic. And I'm like, oh my god, yes! That would have been awesome if he had an entire, an entire, like, bed and freaking all kinds of stuff all set up in the attic. And I was like, yes, this is awesome. And you go into the attic and you find her, like, her blueprints and stuff like that. You find a cell phone with pictures of her in a bed. Maybe this guy was using some kind of photos of some bizarre material to use later, but it never really quite happened. But I guess it was just to cement that that was his phone. Um, Ultimately, to where this girl is getting this stuff from the attic, and she's getting this text that says surprise. And I'm like, all right, all right. So this girl ends up, at first, like, I think she hears something from the newly bought ladder that she bought for the brother and the sister. And so she goes and she takes, luckily, paint buckets right in the attic. What a coinky dink. Frickin' drops them onto the floor, and it's the guy. All golf balled up and looking very weird. Ultimately, yeah, it was kind of like, once I saw those golf balls, like the golf ball head, like I was just like, oh my god! Like, I heard that supposedly this wasn't like guy who drinks like an elixir of some kind. Like, I was just like, okay, well, like, if it's not a guy that drinks elixir, then it has to be some kind of like, it has to be some kind of suit. It has to be some like mechanism that ultimately like either uh reflects images, and ultimately is very much, or some kind of like chameleon-esque like costume or something. And once I saw the suit, I was like, oh yeah, it's a suit. It's a suit. And so ultimately we get it to where it's the first real, true, legitimate appearance of this real guy. And it really cements, really, that this guy is a thing. to where while this girl is struggling to eventually get out of the attic, I guess that gives the person all the time in the world to wash off all the paint. But bizarrely, when looking at it, I was just like, okay, by the time this girl quickly gets down off the attic, it doesn't make sense that all of a sudden this guy's entire suit is clean. But the magic of editing, I guess we have to forcibly say. Anyways, we we find she can cement now that like she's not seeing things. There's a real thing after her, and so consistently she is eventually getting beat up in her own home by Mr. Invisible, and it gets down to a point where eventually she ultimately goes to her like she tries to evade an otherwise charade and try to like and go to people that she knows and like tries to convince them that she's really seeing some stuff or seeing some things, but then ultimately there is that invisible man always over her shadow. She's always looking at somebody that isn't there. And I think that's the coolest part of this movie is the consistent camera work of her just staring off to some bizarre thing. That is the most interesting thing, the paranoia that is built up of her knowing seemingly where this person is. It's very interesting. I like that. I like a weird camera thing could ultimately just be like, yeah, I bet he's there. I bet he's looking at you. I bet he's like farting at you. I bet he's like, ha ha, sucks to be you. Like, I got you, bit. I got you. Cause yeah, we get to where this girl is confessing to her sister. Kind of really just kind of like, yeah, I think I need to tell you what's going on. All of a sudden, we see this knife. This knife just is floating in the air, and it's like, what's going on? Slice and slice with the throat of the sister, and then the knife reappears in the girl's hand. And I'm like, oh my god, he's murdering people and making her the culprit of every one of these things. To where, and already, like, people are just looking as like, oh, I think she killed her. I'm like, dude, she is a table away. How could she have, how could she have taken this knife and really, like, sliced this person? It doesn't quite make sense. But again, she's the only one that's there, so ultimately we have to accuse her of being the one with a knife. So ultimately, this girl gets put into a sane asylum. Cops are ultimately trying to are trying to figure out what the heck is going on. But let's kind of rewind a little bit. Let's rewind a little bit. Because ultimately there is a part of which they interrogate her, and now I can really say this part. So we see this guy and we otherwise just think, okay, this is a guy in a suit, but what does it really look like? What does it really look like? Well, this girl eventually just naturally assumes that it's her old boyfriend that is coming after her because the whole word of surprise ends up consistently coming up, and she knows it's him. There's at some points where he does talk and kind of taunts her and just like, ha ha ha, I got you kind of thing. But so eventually she goes to his house, knowing full well that he's probably going to follow her there the entire time or kind of like be right behind her. All the while we have this girl that ultimately goes in this house because evidently like a combination of numbers that she I guess knows because this guy doesn't otherwise change the combination of anything seemingly. I thought that was a little bizarre. So anybody who knew this this combination in this guy's house could just walk right in. So she goes into this house and she ultimately is going down in this portion of the house where there's ultimately bizarrely this casing, and she doesn't see anything in it, but she kind of opens the door anyways, using the combination of the date of which they first met. Which she's like, "Oh yeah, how great was that? Like how great are you?" Finding out eventually how to eventually turn, let's just say, on the suit, meaning like how to make it so she can see the suit. Yeah, there's cameras all over the suit. And I'm like, yeah, that's how I can kind of like otherwise justify it. It looks like a really goofy suit, but at the end of the day, we could just say, yeah, it looks kind of cool. So this girl takes the suit, hides it somewhere in the house, and we're ultimately just thinking that this girl is going to use this suit against the Invisible Man. Like we're going to have like Invisible Person against Invisible Person. And why does he have so many suits? Like I thought this was just a one of a kind like thing, but I guess once he could figure out how to make one, definitely there had to be more than one suit. So we go into this, and eventually we get to where this girl is interrogated, and she has supposedly proof about this invisible suit. But sadly, she doesn't want to actually go into how she can prove it all. Because ultimately, that guy is otherwise always there. She's always seeing him. She always like tears away to a some kind of thing that is nothing. But that is like such a cool thing. Bizarrely, in a movie, you have to fear nothing. You have to fear what is not there. She might not even think that this person is there, but in her frame of mind, he is. He's watching. He's waiting. So we get to where ultimately this girl has to escape from said like mental hospital, all the while because eventually we really find out that she is actually pregnant. And we're like, oh my god, did he either one like drug her, or did he, just like while she was sleeping, like take advantage of her? Like what happened? Wow. So this girl almost like she eventually meets lawyer guy again, and ultimately is talking about how they can make this all go away, and how like this and that, and ultimately she realizes that she ultimately says that he's like the jellyfish of the two brothers. And I was like, what is up with jellyfishes? Like the girl wears like a jellyfish like pajama thing. Are we ultimately trying to say that this guy uses this suit like a jellyfish, where it just kind of like blends into like the environment and makes him like quasi invisible? Not quite sure exactly where we were going with that. But I didn't know exactly how they went with the suit either. It was just kind of like, how exactly did they go about talking about justifying this suit to people? So we we go into this, and here's where the movie really picks up. We get to where the girl grabs a pen from the attorney and ultimately stabs herself in the arm, ultimately saying that she's going to not give this invisible man her baby. He prevents her from trying to do that, and that's the perfect opportunity for her to, like, I know where you are, motherfucker, and stabs him in the neck. And here's where we get the coolest scene. This girl freaking gets out of her room, and then the invisible man is like sometimes visible, sometimes not. All the while, he is taking down all of these cops because they cannot see him coming. And just the shootouts and Just people trying to like what, huh? And having to feel and look like they're getting beaten up by this guy is just awesome. It was hilarious to me, and just to consistently see this whole entire hallway full of these cops just getting one after the other just taken down by this invisible man, and and the grandmaster plan is to ultimately have this girl like get out of this hospital because the invisible man ultimately mentions that he's gonna take down the one that like one of her friends or someone she cares about or someone that she loves, down to the old fashioned trope of just like, well, I'm not gonna be able to hurt you because you have my baby, but I can hurt someone else. So this is a race home to ultimately, if we didn't have all that cool action scenes all the way through the parking lot and everything like that, we eventually get to the point where, like, okay, we have to have this real showdown. And I don't know, the showdown kind of at the end of this, or the real fight out, finale fight out was kind of, was a little deflating because ultimately it was like that cop hallway scene in the mental hospital was like the climax, and then we kind of had to like fizzle back down after that. So we ultimately get to where this girl is trying to race back home, and the invisible man is back at this house, ultimately going for the detective, beating the crap out of him, and to where eventually the girl does get back home. And then she uses the fire extinguisher. I'm like, you could have used that any number of times. That how many freaking places probably have a fire extinguisher anywhere at any time? This girl could have reasonably grabbed a fire extinguisher to prove to people there's an invisible man that exists. And she could have like, there's your proof, motherfuckers. Shoot the guy. Kill him. I just blew him with a fire extinguisher. There you go. You want proof? There's the proof right there. But dare say, it seems like fire extinguishers in this world was non-existent things. Like, if she knew that this guy would otherwise consistently, like, be there, she could have dare said, in a lot of ways, just kind of like, if she had to smear blood on him, proof right there that he's an existent thing. Fire extinguishers anywhere? Yeah. Invisible Man is visible. So, but anyways, that just kind of like, yeah, but then like that throws a wrench in the whole thing, and that just kind of like, it's not as good then. And then you'd see the guy consistently and whatever, but it's not like this guy isn't scary regardless. So, anyways, it gets down to the fight out, where this girl eventually runs in with a fire extinguisher and then eventually pulls out the gun and fires away at this guy. And I'm like, shoot the head. She went for the body. Shoot him in the head. Make sure he's dead. Keep firing on this guy. Use all the bullets on this guy. Make sure he's 125% dead. Go for the whole roundabout way of definitely making sure this guy is dead. And she gets like a couple pops in the chest, and he drops. And I'm like, here's the reveal. Here's the Scooby-Doo ending where you have to like, and the assailant really was. And I was like, yeah, I knew this entire time that it was. It was. It was the brother. It was the brother. Supposedly. Supposedly. Because come to find out, the actual Adrian, the guy who was otherwise supposedly the Invisible Man the entire time, was kidnapped and hidden away. And I was like, bullshit. Bullshit. No, 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 no. Like, this is like some Scream 2 bull. or Scream 1 where you have two of them. You have two of them. Like there's sometimes where it probably was the brother, and there's sometimes where it probably was Adrian or Griffin or whoever his name was supposed to be in this movie. The guy that was in the actual Invisible Man that was supposed to be the Invisible Man the whole entire time. Reasonably, when going into the whole dinner scenario after Adrian kind of assumes he won and is now having dinner with his wife and or what would be his wife, and ultimately like we're thinking all is well, like oh maybe she's gonna forgive him and maybe they're gonna maybe she has the confidence to just really just kind of like yeah, this is gonna be what it was, but since you seem to have a lot of money, like maybe I'll just kind of have like Avi as a father, but but we still have that suit that is waiting in the wings that Adrian evidently does not know where it is. So again, we have this point where this girl ultimately mentions that she's gonna go to the bathroom and clean herself up. Now I'm like, ah. And the entire time, this girl has a wire for the cop to listen to, and trying to get some incriminating evidence on this guy. But instead, we have to where this guy supposedly knife to throat and then plops down, cementing supposedly he had done himself in because he's the only one in the environment. But really, we know better. We know better that this girl killed this guy. Come on. We know better. She has suit in hand. She's walking out of it more confident than ever because this guy is dead. And that is just kind of how the movie just like ends. It ends with that hurrah moment where this girl who ultimately was tortured and manipulated by this guy wins in the end. It will be kind of interesting to ultimately see exactly where they go about having this, what this girl does next. But then also, like, it won't have a horror element because what are they like? Is someone else gonna have this suit somewhere? Is there gonna be another suit that somebody forgot about? Like, is this girl gonna like be able to manufacture multiple suits? Again, I didn't like very much how this guy otherwise had too much mystery on him. When honestly, really and truly cementing this guy, I could not really think that he could really be like a scientist who makes this suit. But I guess ultimately, when you hear how much money he has, I guess you have to forcibly, and how manipulating he was, I guess you had to forcibly just kind of go, okay, I guess I have to kind of go with this story. At the end of the day, I could say that there were, like, it would be interesting to see if where this goes in a sequel form because maybe somebody else will get the suit. Maybe it'll go from person to person. Maybe the suit will end up in the wrong hands, and that'll be kind of an interesting endeavor to kind of see wrong people getting the suit in their hands and ultimately not understanding what the suit is. And yeah, because who knows? Anybody at the end of the day could be the Invisible Man. We've kind of proved that by the end of the movie. And I hope that we really like I hope that the sequel is not just going to be something phoned in because this one did go well in my mind or my eyes. So I hope they don't phone in the sequel if there is one. Or I hope that they actually seem to do something with this. Also, letting people know supposedly they are doing a Wolfman. Supposedly Ryan Gosling is supposedly uh, casted already to be the Wolfman. I'm not quite sure how I feel about that because looking at Ryan Gosling, I've never really I've seen him in Drive be like a very like silent but deadly kind of person. Yeah, silent but deadly. I'm not sure if I'm gonna exactly buy him as the Wolfman. I just don't know. I think we need. I think like if and I think it has to be a guy in a suit. I just don't think CGI works for this character if they're gonna go about doing that. I think go back to man in the suit. I just think it would work better. I don't know if Ryan Gosling really wants to put that kind of cosmetics and kind of time and grind out. I think the Del Toro movie was guy in a suit as well. We had the guy that worked on like the Planet of the Apes Tim Burton movie and Werewolf in Paris. He worked on the Wolfman suit. So I don't think they're gonna get the same guys that otherwise worked on that Wolfman to do this Wolfman because Rick Baker is retired. Because and plus he hated like working on the last Wolfman movie, and so if they're gonna get anybody, it's probably not gonna be as high as caliber as before. And like I said, it's probably gonna end up being like a CGI Wolfman, and I'm just like, like we need to go back to like a Werewolf in Paris kind of scenario. We need to go back to that. Give people a reminder that that thing existed at one point and was a good quality film. Because at the end of the day, Ryan Gosling really needs to give a one of a kind career changing performance. Because Ryan Gosling has just been otherwise a guy that has just been consistently, with the exception of maybe Murder by Numbers or Murder of Crows or something like that, the movie that he was with Sandra Bullock in, he really hasn't done anything that made me go, wow, Ryan Gosling. He hasn't, like, maybe I loved him in Drive, but I otherwise like look at that movie and see how many times that Ryan Gosling said absolutely nothing and just stared at the screen or stared at people throughout most of the movie. That is probably his best performance because I cannot dare say any Ryan Gosling film to me holds any high caliber of anything. Maybe Lars and the Real Girl, I could ultimately go out of my way to say that that was a pretty good performance for Ryan Gosling. But other than that, he needs to do something for people to have him be put back on the map. And I hope that this is the performance for him. So at the end of the day, yeah, the Wolfman. Are we gonna get a Dracula movie? Supposedly we might be getting a Van Helsing movie with supposedly Jason Momoa as Van Helsing. Uh, now, are we just gonna create another bad Van Helsing movie just for the sake of doing so? I just don't. I like Jason Momoa, but I just don't like him in that kind of role anymore. Like, I don't want him to be the leading role. I would much rather have him be a supporting role. He does an amazing things when he's a supporting actor. When he's a lead, like, I think more of Jason Momoa is not a good thing. So at the end of the day, I'm going to say I'm out of here. Goodbye, everybody. Bye, everybody.